Hi there. Thanks for joining me for this fifth critique video, and I'll be taking a look at the work of three photographers, Yanan, Ezra and Cesar. I'll try to make my commentary as useful as possible so that everyone watching can get something out of it. I'll try to point out where the images are working and also offering possible ways of making them stronger. Looking at a portfolio of images is very different from analyzing a single image. A number of additional factors come into play. How do the images work together in terms of style, mood? How are they sequenced? And it also becomes clear when some images are stronger than others. Creating an essay is a discipline that helps to focus your attention more clearly on what you want to say. I think that the monograph or the essay is where photography really comes into its own. It feels to me that this practice is probably closer to writing a book or making a film than it is to getting a quick snapshot on the run. You are exploring ideas of storytelling through subconscious clues and gestures. And you're also linking on the visual level, but also on a deeper meaning level. Unlike film, you are limited to a finite number of frames, and therefore you have to be as eloquent as possible. Thanks again to these three photographers for sending their work in, and let's go across and take a look now.
They say that the camera never lies, but it can stretch the truth.
Crazy, man.
What makes a man do this?
Yanan says that this is a street photography series taken in an open market in Jerusalem. He's focused on a specific time period, that is Friday afternoons, which is when everyone is shopping for Shabbat. He says that he's chosen a particular sequence for the images, so I'll look at them in this order. This first image is very graphic and interesting visually, with a juxtaposition of elements against a clear sky. One might think that looking at this opening image, that the rest of the essay would continue in an abstract theme. But this isn't the case. It's important to open an essay with an image that is representative of the whole body of work, and it should set the style and look for what you're going to present throughout the essay. So for me, this and the last image, they're strong, but they should probably form the basis for another essay that focuses on abstraction. This second image is probably a very good opening image because it sets a scene for viewers to familiarize themselves with the market environment. And it's also a complex picture that immediately draws you into the location and starts to tell you about the people that inhabit the area. There are a number of factors that work towards making this a compelling image. The eye lines of all the people elements work towards drawing one's eye on the customer with the glasses in the center. There are a large number of other lines and elements that reinforce this concentration of our gaze. So the market is the subject, while in this photograph the central figure is our focus. There's a very nice triangle formed by the heads that are at a similar level within the frame. There are also sub-elements that set up a repetition, and these things provide rhythm. Backlighting is quite tricky to work with, but I think Yanan has got it right. The bright areas are not blown out, and the man in the center has this really nice halo of light that makes him visually interesting. There's enough shadow detail in his face to allow us to see that he's choosing what he wants to buy. It's difficult to say, but I think it would probably be a less powerful picture if the light was falling directly on his face, because then we would be forced to put all of our attention onto him, rather than taking him in and then moving around to get a kind of whole combination of what's going on in the market. But very strong image. I think Yanan is shooting through a window because he's picking up some reflections. He's managed to find a position that doesn't allow his shadow to intrude into the frame. And this photograph provides interesting contrast. The guy is at rest in the foreground watching busy people go by. So the image provides something to the story because it's giving us a kind of quiet energy situation within this busy, broader environment. This is a light moment that is given depth because of the woman's expression and her posture. She's intent on getting exactly what she's looking for. There's also a strong diminishing perspective, and the subject is on the front third intersection. I think a bit of work on tones in post-production would help. You could increase the viewer's focus on the woman by using variations in brightness. Yanan has placed himself on one side of a busy street, and he's used, probably a 200mm lens to focus on the intense interaction of the three figures in the background. This picture would be good without the woman in the foreground, but it gains complexity because of the weird kind of visual juxtaposition that is set up by these two interesting faces. Behind the foreground woman is another graffitied face. There are lots of conflicting lines of sight and movements going on, but eventually I'm drawn to the woman in the background with her earnest concentration on what's being said. So Yanan has set up a layered story that makes us as viewers want to ask questions. What are those three in the back talking about? And what's a suitcase doing there? Has anyone just arrived, or are they leaving? And especially, does the woman in the foreground need to find a new hairdresser? Another complex, strong moment. The picture is set up in a way that emphasizes the compositional rule of threes. Even though we can't see the central girl's face, all our attention is drawn to this lively, playful figure. After being drawn to that, we are able to explore the other figures within the frame, and they're all interesting and provoke questions. In this image, the energy drops off. It doesn't have the theatre or the drama that the others do. There's too much dead space on the right. Even though I like the intimate interaction and expressions, I feel that this, like the last one, lacks complexity. It's a bit too neat. If, say, there was a combination of the main elements of the two images, perhaps the viewer would be able to create a story. Okay, now we're back in the territory of theatre and drama. The mood of the expressions and postures match, and so we are immediately drawn into a story. We as viewers want to know what events have led up to this moment. Both subjects are on a similar plane, so using a long lens, he's isolated them against a soft, slightly blurred background. If the background was sharp and busy, we would have been distracted away from the drama of these two individuals. This photograph is interesting and well composed, but it doesn't have the subtle complexity of the others that I've discussed. The communication that we get from this is about sex and seduction, and that's fine if the essay was delving into that subject matter. But for this story, it might have been more mysterious if he wasn't present. I'm also not so sure what this photograph says about the market. This one for me is a non-moment. I can't find any secondary message or mystery within it. This one too is a straight portrait that doesn't have the same feel of the others. This is a gentle, probably slightly nostalgic image. The last image, as I said at the beginning, Yanan has started and ended his essay with graphic or abstract images. Unfortunately, I feel that even though both images are strong, their aesthetic is too different and therefore they distract the viewer from the central theme. There really are fantastic shapes and lines in this shot. So just to sum up, I would say that Yanan has created the basis for a strong essay. He has 6 or 7 compatible images that are consistent to the theme as well as the aesthetic. He just needs to hang in there with his subject a bit longer and be more rigorous about the editing process. Okay, well done, and thanks for sending it through. Ezra is a 19-year-old beginner photographer, and she recently visited New York City for the first time. She said that she wanted to photograph the city in a manner that wasn't touristy. She says that she's put a focus on people and their surroundings, looking for beauty in unseen details. So basically, Ezra is applying a more photojournalistic eye as she's moved around New York. And I think that she's managed to achieve this. When one looks at the images, you get a sense that she's observing with an inquisitive journalistic eye. The intention behind this set of images is very different from Yanan's project. He set up a theme and a location and then returned again and again to build up the essay. Ezra, on the other hand, is training herself to look subjectively at things that she comes across and then to compose an image that illustrates her thoughts. This is primarily what newspaper photographers do. They're sent out to get the best photograph that they can within a given situation in order to illustrate a particular story. So given that this is what we're looking at, I'm going to suggest how Ezra could have perhaps taken her subject matter one step further. For me, the interesting aspect of this photograph is the repetition of the color yellow. William Eggleston is the master of making interesting images by accentuating the presence of a color. The meaning of the photograph then becomes the color itself. This shot taken from the same position doesn't say enough. If the woman was living in a poor neighborhood and was wearing ragged clothing, then it would become a statement about poverty. Here we have a statement about how annoying it is for anyone to carry heavy shopping bags. In this shot, Ezra has created simplicity that matches the subject matter. The space is uncluttered and the sports lines create an orderly grid for the subject to operate in. Tai Chi sword forms have very dramatic moments. So it might have been possible for Ezra to wait for a more dynamic moment. In this shot, she's used diminishing perspective effectively. The line of people and the books create a strong diagonal. In order to give this picture energy, though, there needs to be a dynamic event or happening around about where the masked man is. At the moment, for me, he and the whole picture is too passive. I really like this shot. It's quirky and humorous. This man is tending his plants wearing an over-the-top US flag hat. Also, the lines in the hat are mirrored by the shapes within the wheel. So this might be a good starting point to expand on a story. I think what Ezra is seeing is the juxtaposition of color and shapes. But I feel the moment just didn't come together. If the circumstances allowed this kind of combination, then it could have become a dynamic shot. What Ezra is possibly seeing here is the graffiti van and the repetition of graffiti on the building behind. As it is, the shot doesn't really hold one's attention for long. In order to make a powerful statement about this juxtaposition, one would have had to bring the elements close together. Another possibility is that she's pointing out the contrast between the beaten-up van and a smart car. But a Porsche would have made this work, but a Honda Ballade unfortunately doesn't crack it. I like the simplified lines, the colors, and the shapes. The small details, I think, are what give this image a bit more complexity. There's writing on the left-hand box that says 9:11 a.m. I mean, that's weird. Why that? Also, hanging shoes often demarcate where drugs are being sold. I would say that this is on a par with the bookseller shot. There's nothing really going on that sparks our attention. Ezra would have needed to hang about at this location until she found something that was out the ordinary. So perhaps, if someone was carrying a blow-up crocodile or something weird like that. Potentially this could have been a winner shot. Ezra has noticed the bird perching on the bench, and there's a squirrel next to the tree trunk behind. But in this composition, the man becomes the primary focus. But because he's turning away, it loses energy and the viewer's eye floats off to the right. So in this case, Ezra would have had to have made a decision about what she wanted to do to really boost the image. Perhaps she had to stop and talk to him and ask if he would allow her to take a portrait. And then something a little bit more exciting could have happened. This photograph has interesting elements that could evoke a story. When I crop it, the juxtaposition of the man next to the mannequin becomes interesting, and the colorful thread reels to the left gain prominence. One also becomes more aware of the arms and the hands. Thanks, Ezra, for sending these images through. You are photographing now in a style that is photojournalistic. Perhaps now you should look at the work of street photographers like Vivian Maier to see how to go a step further and capture moments that are unique and impactful. Cesar doesn't consider himself to be a photographer, but he took these 3 conceptual images. This one is called Milkman. He says that it's a recreation of the way milkmen used to dress in the 50s and 60s. Technically, this shot is well lit and nicely executed. It feels to me closer to an advertising shot than it does to, say, a conceptual art shot. If one is working in the domain of art conceptual photography, then it needs to be more impactful conceptually. This one is called Leak. He says that it's a play on the idea of pierced nipples. So this concept has more complexity. Technically, it's also clean and well constructed. Perhaps there needs to be more mystery though, that if you have that layering, then the kind of aha moment could be then subtly revealed. This one is called 411,720 hours. Cesar says that he isn't happy with the shot as it is. The concentric circles would probably reflect the passage of time, but I'm not clear what the twig shadow represents. So I don't really feel that it's come together yet. Thanks, Cesar, for sending these through. There are an infinite number of conceptual ideas that one can come up with. And so there are therefore many ways to define a project like this. These images that I found are filled with nuanced humor. It's important when creating a project to get out there and start photographing. It's only then that you can step back and recognize what you need to do to move forward. My instinctive response from seeing just 3 images is that Cesar needs to be thinking more deeply about developing his concept, and then create a set of images that illustrate this theme. Then step back again and re-look at what you've done. Okay, best of luck. Thanks to all of you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.